In the 1930s, Lady Cunard was at the heart of British society, closely associated with the country's leading figures, including the future king and his mistress. But how did a girl born into the lawless Wild West end up here? Join me to find out. The woman who would become known in later life as Lady Cunard or Emerald Cunard was born in San Francisco as Maud Burke on the 3rd of August 1872. Her father was James Burke, an Irish-American who claimed to descend from Robert Emmet, an Irish romantic republican who had led a doomed revolt against British rule in Ireland back in 1803. Little is known about her mother, but it's believed that she was half French. The city of San Francisco was a very different place when Maud was born there to what it would become in the 20th century, having been founded in the late 18th century as a missionary settlement by the Spanish before turning into a wild gold rush town, with thousands of speculators heading there by the 1840s. Yet, the Burkes did not spend long here. James got in early and had already made his money during the boom of the 1850s and 1860s. They relocated to New York City when Maud was young, where she developed a love of classical music. Her parents also began courting several aristocratic and prominent families from Europe's noble houses, this being a period during which many American heiresses were being married off to European noble houses who were history rich but cash poor. For a time a match with Prince Andrzej Poniatowski, the grandson of the last king of Poland, was considered, but instead in 1894 he married Elizabeth Helen Sperry, an heiress from California. Although this match did not work out, she eventually would find her European husband, meaning she would have to leave her country. Because of this, she wouldn't have been able to watch her favourite shows, something that you might have experienced, but not to worry, today's video partner NordVPN has you covered. Okay, I know TV and Wi-Fi didn't exist back then, but it does now, so you need to stay safe while online. Say you're at a cafe, connecting to the Wi-Fi, you'd probably think nothing of it, but it's possible that criminals are stealing your data. Luckily, with NordVPN you can protect against malware, trackers, ads, and anyone trying to steal your information, thanks to its next generation encryption, and best of all, you stay protected with a single click. Two things I love about Nord, other than allowing you to watch content anywhere in the world and protecting you online, is that they have dedicated apps for all major platforms, and one account protects up to 6 devices. Make sure to use my link to get an exclusive NordVPN deal. Also, NordVPN is celebrating its 11th birthday, so for a limited time only, you will also receive an additional mystery gift on top. And if you change your mind, Nord has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so be sure to try it out. With the Poniatowski match out of the question, the Burkes began courting Sir Bache Cunard. Born in 1851, Cunard was the grandson of Samuel Cunard, a Canadian-born British shipping magnate who in the 1840s had realised the potential for regular fast transatlantic voyages on the new steamships which had just been developed. The Cunard Line Company which he developed eventually emerged as one of the largest superliner companies in the world, rivaled only by White Star Line, the builder of the Titanic, while the Cunard Company constructed the famed Lusitania, which was infamously sunk by the Germans in 1915 when the United States was still neutral in the First World War. Consequently, Bache came from an esteemed family of the late 19th century, one which hardly needed to arrange a marriage to a rich American family. However, Maud had grown into an acknowledged beauty, and so in April 1895, Cunard and Burke were married. Because the Cunard Line business was primarily based out of Britain, the couple settled in London. A child called Nancy, about whom we will hear more later, was born in 1896, but family bliss did not follow. Bache was in his mid-40s by the time they married, while Burke was only half his age, and still in her early 20s. They had little in common, and as the marriage went on a pattern developed, where Bache preferred to spend time in his country retreat in Leicestershire, being a keen huntsman, while Maud preferred the social life of London. Eventually, she and Bache would separate in 1911, though they never divorced and remained married on paper down to his death in 1925. Maud retained the Cunard name for the remainder of her life. Additionally, because Bache had inherited the Cunard baronetcy, a minor British noble title, she was Lady Cunard within British high society of the time. As the years went by in England, Maud established herself as one of the city's leading society hostesses. At the time, Britain was the centre of the world's largest empire and flooded with money, and many of those who were rich on the back of large inheritances or advantageous marriages used their wealth to fund a bustling social life. Maud was one such hostess. Between the 1900s and the 1930s, she held lavish parties in her London home, ones which were often attended by some of the country's leading political and artistic figures. Maud cultivated such connections, being well-read herself and a lover of the arts, particularly classical music, for which she had developed a keen appreciation during her earlier years in New York. By the 1920s, Cunard had become famed in this respect, and had cultivated the name Emerald Cunard. She also had several rivals for the position of London's most acclaimed hostess, notably Lady Sibyl Colefax, a descendant of a British official who had prospered in India. Hostesses like Cunard and Colefax competed to outperform each other when hosting parties in London throughout this period. While her marriage was largely one of convenience, Maud was involved in numerous other relationships from very early on in her time in London. Two of these generated a lot of attention. One of these acquaintances was George Moore, an Irish novelist, poet, playwright and art critic. Moore was an influential cultural figure, and from amongst his many works, Confessions of a Young Man stands out as an inspiration on later writers like James Joyce. He became acquainted with Maud in the 1900s, and for a time was infatuated by her, inspiring several heroines in his books of the 1900s and 1910s, though his affections were largely unrequited. The opposite was true of Cunard's relationship with Sir Thomas Beecham, one of the leading conductors of the day. 7 years her junior, Maud and Thomas began an affair in 1909 or 1910, while she was still theoretically living with her husband. This continued on and off for the next 30 plus years. Emmet became a tireless supporter and fundraiser for Beecham in his artistic endeavours, but biographers generally agree today that her love for him was not reciprocated to the same extent by Beecham. Nevertheless, he remained a frequent presence in her life throughout the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s and early 1940s. Although Cunard's political sophistication was limited, she played a certain role in the mid-1930s in British politics. This was through her courting of many high society figures who were prominent supporters of British fascism. The first of these was Sir Oswald Mosley, a former Conservative and Labour MP who in 1932 had founded the British Union of Fascists. Around the same time, Mosley became involved in a relationship with Diana Mitford, one of the famed 6 Mitford sisters. Mosley and Mitford were both attractive and charming, exactly the kind of figures whom Cunard invited to her gatherings without knowing very much at all about the details of their political leanings. It was through Mosley that Cunard eventually began courting Joachim von Ribbentrop, the German ambassador to Britain in the mid-1930s, and eventually the Nazi foreign minister. He became a feature of several of her parties while he was in England. Moreover, it is now generally believed that Cunard was responsible for exposing Edward, Prince of Wales, who eventually became King Edward VIII for a brief period in 1936, to many fascist figures, actions which paved the way for his sympathetic view of fascism and Nazism in the second half of the 1930s. Thus, while Cunard's support for fascism was superficial, it inadvertently had a bearing on British politics in the 1930s. Another notable feature of Cunard's life is her relationship with both Wallis Simpson and her eventual husband King Edward VIII. Simpson was an American woman who had married Ernest Simpson as her second husband in the mid-1920s, following which she relocated to England as a result of her husband's business dealings. There she became a feature of London's high society parties, through which she met Emerald. They then became close friends. In the mid-1930s, although she was still married to her second husband, Wallis began an affair with the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne of Britain, Prince Edward. Cunard was soon an acquaintance of Edward's as a consequence, and it seems to have been through her that Edward first met Oswald Mosley at a party in 1935, beginning his gradual appreciation for European fascism, one which would eventually lead to a tour of Nazi Germany in the autumn of 1937 and accusations for years afterwards that Edward had been secretly conspiring with the Nazis during the Second World War. Back in the 1930s, Edward's relationship with Wallis was hugely problematic, on account of her being a divorcee and the fact that her relationship with Edward had begun while she was still married to her second husband. The problem turned into a full-blown crisis when Edward succeeded to the throne as King Edward VIII in January 1936, upon the death of his father, King George V. In the months that followed, a constitutional crisis began to develop as the British government, led by Stanley Baldwin, informed the king that he would have to choose between Wallis and the throne. Throughout the crisis, Cunard strongly supported Wallis, hoping that, if Simpson eventually became queen, she would acquire a prominent position at the royal court. It was not to be. In the end, in early December 1936, Edward had to cave to the political pressure and abdicated the throne to his brother, who succeeded as King George VI. Edward and Wallis relocated to Paris as the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and the Emerald never became a feature of Britain's royal court. In her later years, her association with certain fascists brought her time as a society hostess to an end. With Adolf Hitler and the Nazis appearing ever more aggressive on the international stage, Britain had no option but to declare war on Germany on the 3rd of September 1939, following the invasion of Poland. The advent of war brought rationing, austerity, and an end to society parties of the kind which Emerald had become famed for hosting. Moreover, her sympathetic attitude toward fascism and her courting of figures like Mosley, who was arrested in the summer of 1940 and spent most of the remainder of the war in prison or under house arrest, ensured that many people stayed clear of Cunard during the war years. Maud had only one child, a daughter with Sir Bache, who was born in 1896, and whom they named Nancy. In 1911, following her parents' separation, she went to live in London with her mother, and consequently came of age in a household where some of the leading political and literary figures of the day were regular visitors. For a time, there was a rumour that George Moore was in fact her biological father, but this possibility is generally dismissed today. Nancy relocated to Paris in 1920, where she became an artist and a leading vocal opponent of fascism and the racial views which spread through European society in the interwar years. She was also a muse to many literary and artistic figures of the day, including Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, with whom she was romantically involved for a time. Maud and Nancy's relationship was strained owing to their differing politics, with Maud entertaining Oswald Mosley in London in the mid-1930s, while at the same time her daughter was writing in fierce opposition to Benito Mussolini's invasion of Abyssinia and the nationalist faction in the Spanish Civil War. This mother and daughter's declining relationship was exacerbated by Nancy's deteriorating mental health and growing alcoholism. Maud's final years were nomadic ones. She briefly left for the United States after Thomas Beecham moved there, living out of a luxury hotel in New York for a time. However, when she learned that her longtime love intended to marry a famous pianist of the time named Betty Humby, Maud elected to return to Britain. She spent much of the remainder of the war and the period after living out of a room in the Dorchester Hotel on Park Lane. For one of London's most prominent society hostesses of the interwar period, it was a lonely end. She died on the 10th of July 1948, aged 75, following which her ashes were scattered in Grosvenor Square in the city. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Lady Cunard. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of the lab down below in the comments, and if you have any other suggestions, also be sure to leave them in the comments. I've already covered many of the people I mentioned in this video, such as Wallis Simpson and Diana Mosley, so be sure to check those out, and I really hope you guys have notifications turned on to get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.